Life and death, it's all a dance. Talking love and giving chance. Laughs and tears, we're here to share. Join us now, we're always there.
Do you know again what your evil wife sent me?
She did just tell me that you said, "Why do you hate me, Beth?"
Yes, I said, "Why do you hate me, Beth? I love you."
She did tell me that. Tell me, what did she send you, Genna?
The biggest mistake I've ever made in my entire life was informing you that I'm afraid of rats. Truly, like the biggest mistake of my life.
Honestly, in my defense, I would not do such a thing to you. However, I probably should have not told Beth. Who are we having on today?
Today is actually an incredibly special episode. So, before becoming a life coach and a sex educator, I've worked 15 years in the foster system, working with children in the system as well as their families, as well as foster families that they're with in different capacities. So, today we are having Hadiyah on, and she is one of my pride and joy foster children turned into just an amazing, amazing human. I shouldn't even say turned into. She's always been from the first day I met her, which was my very first client in that position that I had just received. So I was like gone from like a little bit of a different position. And I remember I had to go meet her and I'm like, oh geez, this is like a 15, 16-year-old girl. And she had a whole history of stuff. And I was like, this may not be good. And literally the second I walked in, I'm like, okay, we are never gonna not be together in some capacity. She is like, the best way I can describe her is like a little Spitfire. She's actually shorter than me, if that is possible for another adult to be shorter than me.
How tall are you, Genna?
I'm 5, maybe 1.
On a really good day.
A good day, I am 5'1". So I wanted her to be on here so that children maybe going through that or people considering fostering could just see the progress and how important it is for them to have stability in their lives. And she has a very unique situation, so I'll have her tell you. But I will also say I am still very close to the foster system and kids I have worked with and have watched kind of grow up and with their families and supporting them. And I myself have fostered, so I don't ever think I'll be apart from that. I actually love it, and people are needed desperately to foster. So after this episode, of course, as always, I would love if anybody interested and wants some information can reach out to me. It's truly the best gift that you can give a child. And it's something I don't think I'll ever stop doing. But I love the teens. I love working with the teens. They're just the coolest people ever. So eventually that'll kind of happen too, I think, where I'll start fostering some of the older kids.
It's amazing that you say that too, because it's usually, I imagine, the teens that unfortunately get sort of left behind in the system, is it not?
Yes. Yes. And when I started out, I wanted to work with the little kids. Like I wanted to be with the younger ones and then I was like, "Oh, I actually don't want this at all." Like I wanted to be with the kids that have gone through it and needed somebody to support them and be there for them and tell them that they're proud of them and come to their graduations and everything like that. I just loved it. And I didn't realize that till I started doing it, but I mean, I talked to almost all of the kids and their families that I've worked with, and that's quite a bit of people.
How difficult was it for you to leave the foster system in making this transition into your new career?
It wasn't difficult because I know I'm going to stay involved. Where I was with it, I don't think this is going to be something everyone hasn't heard before, but I was having a lot of issues with some of the directions, not who I worked for. I absolutely loved where I worked. Everybody was incredibly supportive. I miss being a part of that.
That's right, because while you did transition out of your career in the foster system, you since then have you fostered, is it 2 kids that you've fostered
3.
since then? Would you say that you had to make the transition from your career in the foster system and into this career in order for that to have been a feasible option for you?
Yes, I do. I could have done it before, and I will say it's the best thing I ever did as far as being able to relate to the families. It's like anything else. If you've
Yeah.
experienced it, who see things differently and have a different understanding, I could tell them all day, like, "I'm sorry, I'm trying to support
Right.
you." But being able to say, like, "I understand. I've been in the position." I will say the organization that I foster for now is fantastic and insanely supportive. So I can't say much about that, but there are definitely aspects that are not as much so. And I do feel that if I weren't the person I am and understand the system and everything else, it may be
Yeah.
a little bit more difficult. There she
Oh,
is. There
there
she
she
is.
is.
Hey,
Hey, my
Hi.
girl. How are you?
I had to get them situated.
Her two little ones. How are you?
I'm good. How are you guys doing?
Hi, Hadiyah. My name's Noelle.
How you doing, Miss Noel?
How are you?
I'm good. A little tired, but I'm good.
Of course. I read that you did the baby's hair yesterday for 2 hours.
Like 2.5.
What? What'd you do?
Nothing really, nothing major. I just
Was she okay with it?
no, we like literally was fighting, arguing the whole
That's a shock.
time. We took like 3 breaks. Yeah.
You know what I say to that, Hadiyah? She's just like somebody I know. Exactly like someone I know. Hello, Hadiyah. How are you?
I'm good.
Good. So I had explained how you and I met and talked a bit about the foster system. So are you able to give us a little bit of a background with you in the system? And it doesn't have to be specific details, but just kind of your experience.
So at the beginning I went into the foster care system at 15. Yeah, I was 15. Um I had left home and my mom reported me as a runaway, but it wasn't until after she was supposed to give my cousin custody of me. We had discussed it because she knew I didn't want to go home, just because of the things that she was saying to me, and I just didn't feel like safe or like she loved me anymore. So I just didn't want to be in that house. So I asked to go stay the night over at my cousin's house and I just never came back. And then after she reported me as a runaway, I stopped going to school for like 4 months, I think it was. And then my cousin had given me, some insight and advice and was just like, honestly, at this point you should just turn yourself in, go to school, just deal with the consequences from there, and then we'll just go to court and we'll just figure out how you can get placed with me. So I went to school and I didn't even get to first period. I just remember walking into school, going to homeroom, and they called me right from homeroom down to the principal's office. And as soon as I walked in there, I said, "You must be my caseworker. Am I going to placement today?" And she was like, "Yep, that's the first CYF building I had ever been to." And my caseworker at the time, at first I didn't like her. At first I could not stand her. I think it was just like a defense mechanism for me because I was so used to everybody being against me or trying to hurt me in some way that it felt odd. Like it felt like she was sent here to like hurt me or something. Like I didn't understand why she was so kind to me and why she, you know, used to do stuff for me and like go out her way to do stuff for me. It felt like a setup. And then when I went up placement, I want to say within like my first month of being there, it was hard at first for me, but having the caseworker I had and some of the staff that was there made it kind of easier. The girls never made it that much
I was
easier.
going to say, Hadiyah, how were you there?
um I was a bit much. I will say that I was a bit much. I remember one incident. This one girl. She used to like. She thought she was picking on me, but it was really just me like ignoring her and allowing her to keep going, going, and going until I just snapped one day. And I remember we was at the dinner table, and I just climbed over. I just hopped over the table and I just tripped her.
Yep. Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
I was just tired of her bothering me, like, and she was just always getting smart, always saying stuff. Like, I got tired, so I got on restriction after that. I was on restriction the whole time, and actually, the entire time, like, I went on a few outings, but the majority of the time, I was on restriction.
Explain what restriction means.
So, restriction was where it was pretty much like punishment. Like, you were grounded to one facility. Like, you weren't allowed to go on outings. I couldn't have like extra privileges in the house. So like restriction was really just that. Like I was able to watch TV. I was able to have my phone calls, but how everybody else could have extra phone calls, I wasn't allowed to have extra phone calls. And that was pretty much the entire time I was there. I think I was at Sylvan for like 5.5 months.
And that's like a group home. So that's like a home where a bunch of girls, usually I think what they're 12 to 18 or 13 to 18 there.
At the time, I thought that the age group was 13 to 18
Okay. So it's a quite a range of ages and personalities. So it's not an easy situation to walk into.
at all. It definitely wasn't. I mean, I met a few people there, and I actually met a cousin there too. But after a while, like being at different placements, other placements and stuff, I realized that Sylvan was probably like one of my favorite ones. I was at Arberley after Sylvan. Arberley's out McKeesport, and they have two buildings. Well, now it's different, but at the time they had the main building where the boys were located at, and then they had a house for the girls. And the house for the girls was where I was obviously, and I didn't like it. I was on restriction there too the whole time.
There's a trend. There's a trend here.
Yeah, I was definitely on restriction there.
Wait, did you know Genna at this point?
hmm
Did I? I thought we met when you were at resident or at independent living.
No, you're right. You're right. You're right. You're right. We
I
did
can
meet when I went
remember
to.
walking into your
Nope,
apartment.
you're right. We did meet when I was so long ago. We did meet when I first started at Action Housing, which was the lofts on Fifth Avenue. So when I was at Sylvan and Arberley, I didn't know Miss Jenna. But by the time I went to Action Housing, I didn't know her. I didn't even know her when I was going to Bethesda because I was at Bethesda too at one point. I went to Bethesda
That's
because
three group homes that you went to from the time that you started placement to before you moved into Action Housing, which we can explain what that is. So the three transitions and the three moves, how was that for you?
what was really a lot for me was when I went with family members. Like when I lived with my grandma right after Auberly, I wanted to go there, obviously, like that's why my judge granted me to go there. But I had to, make sure I did all the necessary steps before I was able to be placed with my grandma. But after I got placed with her, it was fine at first, but then after a while, I felt like my grandma just kept trying to treat me like a baby. Like she seen me as this 12-year-old that used to walk around in my sister's heels all the time and play lawyer and doctor in the basement. But that wasn't who I was anymore. So I felt like she wasn't able to wrap her head around that.
Especially after everything it sounds like you had been through in that interim time, going through different group homes and whatnot.
Yeah. I think for me, like you were saying, I think for me it was like I changed. I was different because going through different group homes, like you're not the same person you was going in coming out. You're never going to be the same person. She didn't know how to understand that or accept that. So that's where we eventually ended up clashing, and I ended up leaving her house and going to go live with, at the time I consider her to be my aunt. They ended up telling me that I had to go back to placement. So yeah, I went back to Auberly and I had to stay there for a little bit. I left Auberly and then my judge granted me to be placed with my aunt Kia, and then she became my foster mom after that. And then there was an incident, with my foster mom where we were, getting into arguments. And I think really it was more so by that time, like, yeah, she watched me grow up from 14 to 17 when I got placed with her. But at that time when I got placed with her, I was a different person by then. Like, I had been through the system. I had been through a lot. I had multiple caseworkers. It was just a lot of different transitions for me. And at that time in my life, I didn't like transition. I didn't like change. Change just wasn't, it didn't seem good to me. So I always acted out because there was just so many different changes, and it's like y'all expected me to just be accustomed and be okay with all these different changes. It's like, no, like, for a girl, it's, to me at that time, I felt like it should have been mom, dad, child, but I didn't have that. It's more so of like a defense mechanism for me. I don't like change. I'm not going to adjust to change. But I think that was also like a default for me in the long run, because after a while I realized, like, hey, like, this isn't something that I want to keep doing. I don't want to keep feeling like this, acting like this. So uh I think that's where me and my foster mom kept clashing, because I was already set in my own ways. And, of course, she was already older, so she was already pretty much set in her ways and how she felt like, a child should behave and act at a certain age. She ended up putting her hands on me and calling the police, telling the police, like, hey, I put my hands on her, but she has to go. So she ended up getting incarcerated for that, and I ended up going backup placement, and that's when I ended up at Bethesda out Meadville, PA. I hated it there. I hated it. The staff were okay. It was the children. Like, I hated it. And by that time I was almost 18. Like, I was turning 18 in 2 weeks.
When you
So it
say
was
it
like
was the children, so were you placed with kids of all ages, or was it people mostly your age?
all ages.
Okay.
Like
So
when
they generally split it up, like with the homes that we're kind of talking about, generally the age groups that they'll keep together are like it's either 12 or 13 to 18. So like that grouping, and then the other groupings will be the younger kids. Obviously the placements aren't super young children, they're in the foster homes, but unfortunately there's not enough foster homes available to accommodate all the children that are in the foster system. Or there could be something like what Hadiyah was just saying, where it was an emergency situation where she needed a placement right away. No foster family was available, or Hadiyah may have said, I don't want to go to another family. And then they placed her in the group home. So that's kind of how that process works.
Okay.
And then I ended up going back to my grandma's for a little bit. After that, I was working at McDonald's in Oakland, and I just realized I couldn't stay with my grandma no more. So my caseworker at the time, she pretty much was just like, "Hey, there's Action Housing. Do you want to go here?" Da da da. So I went for an interview. She was like, "You gotta pay $50 to get in," and then they accepted me, and then I moved in. And it was like as soon as I moved in, I met Miss Jenna. And I
Yes.
honestly will say, like, before I met Miss Jenna, I was still like, all over the place mentally and emotionally. But by the time I met Miss Jenna, I she can contest to this. By the time I met Miss Jenna, it was like it was like a different shift. Like, I don't know, it's like she brought out like a different person in me. Like, I don't know. Like, and the craziest part is I didn't really like care for, I used to tell her all the time, like, yeah, I don't really care for Caucasians, because like
Oh yes, she told me that all. Imagine if I would have said that to you, girl, when I walked in there, which it would have been a total lie, but I
But
would never say.
that was also obviously something from your experience, right? Like, there's a reason that you felt like that.
it was really just trauma for me, because everybody that I came encountered with in the system that was, Caucasian, I couldn't stand them. My very first one was Caucasian her, and I loved her.
Oh, I'm like,
But the second
she
one I
has
couldn't stand. I
nicknames. She has
couldn't.
a lot of nicknames for people, a lot of extra words that she usually says.
What was it that you think that Jenna did or had that made you sort of, I guess, be open to that shift? Like, was there a certain quality, or is there a certain quality in her that made you, 'cause I imagine it was trust, right? Like, at a certain point, like, that barrier of your defenses was broken down and you started to trust her. So what is there anything in particular that you can identify that was sort of that turning point for you?
So, in regards to that comment, I will say honestly, like, I wasn't the type of person to trust immediately when I first met a person. But Miss Jenna, she gave me like a mom vibe for me. And she says all the time, I'd rather be like the sister for you, but
Yes, you do say that all the time. Thank you.
but
I'm glad you acknowledged that.
She also gives me the mom vibe.
yes, I don't know
Older
what it was,
sister.
but it's like she just gave me that vibe. Like, in a past life, she could have been my mom or something. Like, I don't.
I would love that.
So it was just like, I don't know, it's like an automatic like trust, and I felt connected. I didn't have those ups and downs with Miss Jenna like that I had with everybody else. Like I swear, no lie to you, I'm 25, about to be 26 in July, and I've never, since the time I met her at 18, I've never experienced like a distrust or like any type of like argument. Like Miss Jenna has literally said things that I hated, like I didn't want to hear, but I never like snapped on her because it was like I knew it was coming from a genuine loving place. So like I understood why she was saying it to me. And it made complete sense. So I'm like, oh, okay. And she didn't enable me. She didn't make me feel like, you know, the stuff that I was doing was okay. But she also didn't make me feel like crap. She didn't make me feel like, I was like wrong. She would tell me I was wrong, but she didn't make me feel like I was wrong. Like, but she also didn't justify my actions.
So you felt like she was always in your
For
corner,
that, I will
whether
always,
you felt like she always had your back.
yeah,
And I
like
did. And I still do.
no matter what I did, like no matter what I did, she never judged me. Like, and she didn't like disregard my feelings. Like she always was there for me. So with that, I would just say like, I've always loved Miss Jenna. Like always loved her. I want to say when I first got accepted into the college program, because when I was at the lofts, I used to get in trouble there a lot.
So let me just real quick, what she's talking about now, the action housing is an independent living. So you can, and they're like apartments, and they're actually it was really nice. Like the apartments are very nice. Um, there's some rules that go along with it. Like, isn't there like curfews and you have to sign out if you're going overnight and things like that?
Yeah, but I only had curfew up until I was 20. Yeah, I was 20 when I stopped having curfew.
So they do keep track of you. You're expected to go to different like sessions. You always went to those. I mean, I remember coming and doing some of those workshop kind of things with you.
So mix
Um,
shop. I couldn't stand going to mix
right.
shop, but
Yeah, but
something
I
I
loved
had to
going
do.
with you.
So I did it. Some days I didn't go, but most
For the
most
most part,
times I
you
did.
did.
Most times I did go. And I actually ended up like enjoying it.
I think a lot of the things with Hadiyah, even with the kids, like she's saying, the kids that she was with, Hadiyah's always been incredibly mature for her age. I mean, just the way she talks, the way she acts, she's always thinking ahead. I don't think I've known you at any point where you didn't have a job and that you were trying to provide for yourself and trying to do everything for yourself. And I think that's when I came in and was kind of like, give me some of this. Like, let's talk about what you're doing because you don't have to be that grown up all the time. Absolutely, with like the attitude and the interactions with people, and that, I mean, day and night for her now. And there was such a huge transition with her realization of, I can take a second and not punch out somebody. I can think like I really want to, but that's probably not the best thing to do. So that reasoning skill and stuff all came into play. But for as long as I've known her, her maturity level and just the attitude and the work ethic and all of those things has always been unbelievable. And I think that's what made me just like, this girl needs to be respected. Like nobody should be disrespecting her ever.
And Jenna, I remember when you started the job that you, because Hadiyah, you said was one of your first um kids in that job, right?
She was my first.
And obviously, I had very limited stories on any of your foster kids, but I very specifically remember how highly you have always spoken about her. So I love Hadiyah, like hearing your take on Jenna because 1000% she has always had your back. Like she has always spoken about you again in very like limited terms with me, but just like you could just tell how much love she has for you.
Which she and I had stayed together from after. So after we stopped working together,
Yeah.
which we were together for quite a while, um, then we just stayed together. Like it just was not. It then turned into a different relationship. At which point, I was happy because I could then start bragging on you a lot more. I don't think there's one person in my life that doesn't know about Hadiyah because I'm so insanely proud of her and tell them why I'm so proud of you. So what have you been doing the last few years?
So I started off at CCAC right after high school, and honestly, it was like the best decision I could have made. I changed my major 3 times though, but who's counting? And I got my associate's degree and actually a certificate because I did a dual program in social work. And the funniest part is, I literally tried to do everything else before I did social work. Like everybody was like, "Yeah, don't come over here, do something else. Don't come over here. Don't come over here. Don't come over here." But I still did it anyways. It was like I was called to do it. Like I was supposed to. Like I did early education for a year. I loved it, but I knew that was just something I didn't want to like stick with for long term. And I worked in childcare for 6 years. But then after I graduated with my associate's degree in social work and I got my certificate, I applied for a second chance, where I currently work for right now. But when I started off, it's a
Tell them what
kinship
second chance.
agency. They work in partnership with Allegheny County CYF. A second chance does a lot for the community, a lot for the foster care system. Like they do a lot, and then they have different locations. So they have a location out Philly, they have a location in New Hampshire, and then they have a location in Pittsburgh and Virginia. But I started off as an FST driver, so it was family transportation, well, family service transportation, and all I did was pick up children, take them to their visits. I supervised a few visits if it was supervised, and I liked it. I did that for like 3.5 months, and then I got promoted to a kinship navigator, which I've been doing ever since. And it's going
Congratulations.
on
That's
2 years
amazing.
since I've been. Thank you. It's going on 2 years since I've been out of second chance. But I actually love what I do.
Explain what that is.
So, a kinship navigator, we work alongside the caseworkers at CYF. We're stationed at our different offices. We pretty much just do a lot of like family finding, extensive family finding. We complete home assessments. We let the caseworkers know, like, hey, this home's appropriate, or hey, this home isn't appropriate. We reach out to the children. So, like, we meet with the children depending on their ages, typically like 10 and over. I like to meet with all ages. It doesn't really matter unless you're like a toddler or a baby. It's like you can't really tell me where you want to go. But I say like 7 and over, because even 6 and under, it's like, you may like it because they have crayons and markers there, and it's really not appropriate for you to go there. So I'll do my own digging. But 7 and over, it's like they're starting to become a little bit more mature, you know, self-aware, observant. So I pretty much, still will meet with them and, just ask them about their experience and, where they have been, how many different homes they've been in, if they know any of their relatives, etc. And then pretty much just like go from there because I have like a idea. And I talk to the birth parents. We just don't assess birth parents because that is the caseworker's job, but we assess everybody else. So fictive kin, actual kin, we pretty much assess everybody. I've had a few cases, where it was kind of hard to place the child, but I got it done, and I was like, I felt like accomplished, like I really did something, like I really
You
made a
did.
difference. And that's honestly really why I do this, because it's like when I was younger, when I was in the child care, well, foster care system, it was like it was different for me. Like I didn't feel like, honestly, nobody really cared about where we got placed. And I think a lot of that caused a lot of trauma too, for not just myself but a lot of my age group, my generation that was growing up in the foster care system. So now that I work for the foster care system and I'm on the opposite end, it's like I have insight and experience from being in it, but now I have insight and experience from working, for them. And it's completely different, I will say, because when I was in it, you couldn't convince me otherwise that, CYF was good, or uh any type of caseworker was good other than Miss Jenna. But you couldn't really convince me. When I started working there, I started to really realize like a lot of things have changed since I've been 15, 16, 17 in the system. A lot for good. There's still some things that I feel like should be looked at and worked on, and definitely changed within the next 5 to 10 years. At the same time, you can't really like force that, Like it's just something that is gonna have to be done over time. But I will say I do love what I do now, and I wouldn't change it for the world. I'm actually currently working on my bachelor's at Carla. It's a little difficult because they want me to take another math class, the statistics.
Dia and I also bonded over our inability to add. We can't go past like second grade. I don't even know if I could do second grade. Like first grade math is basically where we both are. So she's struggling a bit with one of her math.
That's amazing.
Statistics is not easy at all. I really can't stand it.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't either. That was the only class that I got a failed, but got a D. You could go every single like study session, you wouldn't fail.
So before I graduated, I had got pregnant with my oldest, which is my daughter. And Miss Jenna definitely made that a little easy for me. Hey, because she used to literally be like, I'm gonna come get her, and you could just do homework or you could just sleep. Like, I'll get her for a couple hours. Like, if you want her to stay at night, she can stay at night.
So flipping
But
sweet. She is so sweet and so insanely smart.
she really is.
Like crazy smart. It's like kind of crazy.
It kind of like is scary sometimes though, not gonna lie, because like she just be like catching me off guard with some of the stuff that she does or says to me.
You were working with her from day one, and I cannot even brag enough on your parenting. I mean, 100% hands on, 24/7, reading, words, singing, like everything you can imagine she does with her children. It is just like the most amazing thing to see because she has kind of learned on her own how to be
Yeah,
that way. And
that's
it's just
incredible.
fantastic.
Honestly, for me, I think it was really experience from growing up. Like, I can't really tell you too much from when I was their ages. I don't really remember. But from what I could remember, it was like really dysfunctional and not enough love for me. I wasn't a daddy's girl. I wanted to be, but I wasn't a daddy's girl. I was a mama's girl. But I felt like my mom pushed me away. That honestly made me like who I am as a parent now. I was scared to have a daughter though. I wanted a boy first. Honestly, if I could have had all boys, I would have been okay with that.
Why is that?
I didn't want a girl because I didn't want to turn out to be like my mom and raise her how my mom raised me. Ever since I've had her, it was like a wake up call for me. Like, I don't get me wrong, I'm not perfect and I still make mistakes. I've made a big mistake and it could have cost me everything I worked for and built, but it didn't because the judge seen something in me that I probably didn't even really see in myself, honestly. But I was also going through, extreme postpartum after I had my daughter, and I had a neighbor who was just like constantly harassing me, like constantly. And then one day I just snapped and I went into her apartment to like pretty much like, hey, like chill out. And she swung on me, rightfully so, because I walked into her house. So it was rightfully so. We fought and then she pistol whipped me. And then I got out the house and they arrested me in front of my daughter. So like that was like a wake up call for me. And at first, it was like it was a lot for me to go through at that time. You can even ask Miss Jenna. I was going through a lot, and then I found out I was pregnant with him. It was like a big transition for me because like I already didn't want another baby. I was going through facing felony charges and potentially, risking, school and my job, which I worked so hard to, do and get to this point. So it was like extremely emotional for me. What I will say is I had a good lawyer and the judge really like seen me for who I was. In the long run, I ended up getting, a couple summary offenses and a misdemeanor 3. That it can all get expunged within 5 to 7 years. So like it didn't do nothing to me. It just, put a title on my record.
That's not who you are as a person. Yes, and you recognize that. The fact that you is saying that you recognize that you were the wrong going into her house, that is such a huge statement for somebody that has been through so much to not place the blame on somebody else. You took the accountability for it, and I'm sure that's what they saw in you also.
At the end of the day, ultimately, I had all, decisions to do what I did or not to do what I did. And I still chose to do what I did. For me, it was really just taking that accountability, because it seemed like once I took accountability, it was over. To move on and to never do nothing like that again, pretty much. I don't even argue. Like, if I feel like it's going to get to that point, we can't even be friends or we can't even be around each other, because nobody is ever going to make me get out of character like that again, to where now I'm leaving my babies to pretty much fend for themselves because I'm behind bars.
Do you think all of these things that you've been through, you're able to apply that with the kids you work with?
Yeah, because honestly, like, to me, I feel like the age range of 20 to 25, or like, well, I'll say 18 to 25, are really still learning curves, because no matter what you go through within that time frame, you're learning from it because it's an experience and you're applying it to how you feel like your life should be. So for me, it was okay, I went through this 15 to 18. Okay, I went through this from 18 and 21. Okay, now I'm 22 with a baby. Okay, now I'm 23 with a baby. Okay, now I'm 24 with a baby. For me, it was like, okay, I have to look at this and learn from it. So then when I work with my, youth, and I see them even a tad bit close to the route that I took, I try my hardest to prevent that. Now, granted, we can't always prevent, things like that, because ultimately it's up to them to decide it. No matter 15, 16, 14, 13, 18, you still have that choice. So if you were mature enough to complete that action or do whatever it is that you did, you're mature enough to take accountability and learn from that mistake and continue to, grow and prosper and flourish. So for me, it's like I try to use my experiences as like motivation for other children to, do something different, because it's like, I'm telling you, I did it this way already, and what the consequence is and how your life is going to play out after that. So at that point, it's really totally up to you to decide, like, hey, I'm going to go down that same route or that same road, or I'm going to choose something different now. For me, it was, choosing something different. So it's like, I want the youth to do the same thing, because I already did it.
Right.
I already did it. I don't want a generation of children who literally do nothing but self-sabotage, because I feel like for years I did nothing but self-sabotage, because I felt like the world was against me. Like, coming from a child who's been through a lot, I went through a lot. My dad was abusive. Now, mind you, we have a great relationship now, but that's only because my dad had to go through years of, heartbreak, and realizing that, he probably did do a lot of, do a lot and caused a lot of trauma for his children, going back to jail for a little bit, him dealing with cancer. Like, I feel like all of that played a part into why, he's different now. But growing up, couldn't stand him. Like, I honestly hated him. My mom, she was abusive, but not really more so physically. She was more so, verbally, emotionally, mentally abusive. My dad was the physical abuser. So, like, it was a lot with them too. Over time, and therapy has definitely helped me. I love therapy. I used to hate therapy as Miss Jenna. I couldn't stand I couldn't stand therapy. Like, when she used to be like, just try it, and I used to be like, no. Like, why are you trying to force me to go to therapy?
I'm like, then don't. Okay, don't go. Whatever.
And that's exactly what she used to tell me too. Like, well, okay, well, then don't go. Like, it's not gonna hurt me. And then, like, when I realized, like, oh, like, she telling me don't go, then, like, why are you saying that? Like, it kind of, I don't know. I feel like she used to use reverse psychology on me a lot. But we're not gonna go there. But eventually, I did do it, and I actually enjoyed it and loved it. So now, I go to therapy. I look forward to my appointments and my sessions, because I get to say everything that I've been thinking for however long, and I could just throw it all on the table with no judgment. So it really doesn't matter how old you get. If you don't deal with your triggers, you're gonna be triggered. No matter where you go, you can move out of the state, out of the country. You're still gonna be triggered somewhere, because you never.
As Noelle has. Noelle has actually moved out of the country. She's in the UK.
Yeah, I live in England. You're right. You're right. You can't run away from it.
You're really can't. And I've realized that, like, no matter where you go, no matter what you do, you can't run away from your problems. Like, you have to deal with them.
Hadiyah, thank you so much for sharing so much with us and for being so open and honest. It probably sounds very like sheltered, but it definitely puts things into perspective even more so. It makes me feel lucky for the childhood that I had and for growing up the way that I did. And it's a reminder that not everybody has that, but you're amazing. Like, just hearing your story and seeing how far you've come, you should be so proud of yourself. I'm so glad that you have Genna because she is amazing, and it sounds like she has been a huge crucial part in your story as well as my own and many other people. We always like to end the podcast on, you were just talking about triggers, but we found something that said something about the opposite of a trigger is it called a glimmer. Instead of like, pushing you over the edge, it just sort of like makes you stop and appreciate it, or it made you smile. So we always like to end it on each of us sharing a glimmer. And I know Genna would love to go first because she always loves to go first.
You always make me go first, and I never. Okay, today is going to be a very basic glimmer. Let me see. What is my glimmer for today? Why am I always first? Noelle, don't you have one to start us off?
I do. Yeah.
Perfect. You go.
My glimmer is, so my wife is pregnant, and yes, very exciting. And so I read a book to them last night for the first time, and then today I read a book that my mom used to read to my brother. We don't know if we're having a boy or a girl, but she used to read Love You Forever. So I read that today to the baby in the bump.
Okay, my glimmer is that night I don't know. I do this every time.
You have one.
Go. You have it?
I said you have one. I mean, I guess I could have one.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Hadiyah.
I guess my glimmer would be being a mom, but having the best of both worlds. Because she said it would be like pretty much like a reverse effect of a trigger. So, like, a trigger for me, what it was, I didn't want to have a daughter. But the glimmer would be having a daughter and realizing how much, like, love you can really get from, like, having a daughter. And then having my son can kind of like top it off, because it's two different loves for me. Like, she loves me, but we go at it a lot. He loves me, but it's like different than how she loves me. I don't really know how to explain it. I don't really know.
Genna, I dare you to top that.
I can't. So I'm
You
not going
can't.
to even try.
You should have gone.
My glimmer is, I know. Well, my glimmer is tonight I'm going to start a new treadmill show while I'm on the treadmill. I do my treadmill shows where I only watch the shows while I'm on the treadmill. And I'm not sure what I'm going to switch. I'm trying to spice it up a little bit. So we'll see. I may throw in like a little Game of Thrones or something.
I think you should watch Traitors on BBC.
I know. You told me about that. Okay, I'm going to try to find that.
You should.
Y'all want to watch the shows that I'll be watching.
Maybe. Never know.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Life and Death podcast. Please be sure to leave us a review and comment to let us know what you thought of the episode. And don't forget to follow us so you never miss an update. You can email us at lifeanddeathpodcast@gmail.com. You'll find Genna on Instagram under the handle Genna Marie Life Coaching, and I, Noelle, can be found at Noelle E. Carlin.
Living death through ups and downs, finding smiles beyond the frowns. Stay with us, we'll light the way. See you next time, bright and gay.